Everything you believe about your life might not be fully yours. Most of it may have been programmed into you without you ever realizing it. Most people never realize how much of their life has already been shaped before they even had a chance to think for themselves. From childhood, you start absorbing ideas from your environment, from the people around you, from school, from society, from culture, from media. And slowly, without noticing it, these external voices begin forming your internal voice. At first, it feels normal because everyone goes through it. You are told what is right and wrong. You are told what success should look like. You are told what kind of life is considered good and what kind of life is considered failure. And because you are learning, you accept it. You don't question it deeply because you assume the system around you already has the answers. But the problem begins when those external instructions never stop. Even when you grow older, the same pattern continues. Now it is not just teachers or parents, it is society, social media, trends, expectations, and comparison. Everywhere you look, there is a definition of how you should live, how you should think, how you should behave, and what you should want. And slowly, something very subtle happens. You stop asking yourself what you actually think. You start asking what you are supposed to think. And that is where most people lose themselves. Because when you are constantly following instructions from outside, your inner voice becomes quieter. Your own thoughts start feeling less important compared to what you are being told. You begin trusting external opinions more than your own awareness. And without realizing it, your life starts moving on autopilot. You follow paths that were never consciously chosen. You chase goals that were never deeply questioned. You adopt beliefs that were never personally examined. And you call it normal life, but inside something often feels missing, a sense of true ownership over your direction. This is why so many people feel disconnected even when they are doing everything right, because they are living according to a script they never wrote. And when life is lived through a script, there is always a hidden emptiness, even in success. Over time, this conditioning becomes so strong that questioning it feels uncomfortable. The mind starts resisting independent thinking because it is used to following established patterns. Anything outside the usual system feels risky, uncertain, or wrong, even if it might be closer to truth. And this is the real limitation. Not lack of intelligence, but lack of questioning. Because most of what you believe was not deeply chosen, it was absorbed. But awareness begins the moment you start noticing this pattern. The moment you realize that many of your thoughts are not fully yours but inherited from the environment you grew up in, repeated so often that they now feel like your identity. And that realization is powerful, because it creates the first gap between you and conditioning. In that gap, something new becomes possible: independent thinking. The ability to pause, reflect, and ask yourself, do I truly believe this, or was I simply taught to believe it? And the more you start asking this question, the more your mind begins waking up from automatic programming. Because real freedom does not begin outside. It begins when you stop accepting everything blindly and finally start thinking for yourself. With clarity, awareness, and honest self-questioning that slowly returns control of your life back into your own hands. Most people today are extremely busy, but very few are truly progressing. Their days are filled with movement, activity, responsibilities, and constant engagement, yet inside there is often a quiet feeling of emptiness that they cannot fully explain. It feels like life is always happening, but something meaningful is missing in the experience of it. And this is where the confusion begins. Because society teaches that being busy means being successful. If you are constantly working, constantly occupied, constantly moving from one task to another, it appears as if you are doing something important. And because of that, people start equating activity with achievement. But activity is not the same as progress. You can be busy all day and still remain in the same place emotionally, mentally, and even in your actual life direction. You can wake up early, go through a full routine, handle responsibilities, scroll through information, respond to messages, complete tasks, and still end the day feeling like nothing truly changed inside you. Because motion does not automatically mean growth. Real progress requires direction, not just movement. But most people are moving without ever stopping to ask where they are actually going. And when there is no clear direction, even constant effort becomes scattered energy. This is why many people feel exhausted despite being productive. Their energy is being used, but not always in a focused way. Their attention is divided across too many things at once. Their mind is constantly switching between tasks, thoughts, worries, and distractions. And over time, this creates mental fatigue without emotional fulfillment, because the mind was not designed to be overloaded continuously. And yet, modern life keeps increasing that overload. Notifications, deadlines, expectations, comparisons, and endless information create a cycle where the mind rarely gets a chance to settle. Even in moments of rest, the mind continues processing everything that happened throughout the day. So people remain active externally but restless internally. And this is where the illusion becomes dangerous. Because when you are always busy, you rarely pause to evaluate your life honestly. You don't ask deeper questions. You don't reflect on whether your actions are aligned with your values. You don't check whether your current direction actually leads to something meaningful or not. You just keep going. And keeping going becomes the default mode of living. But living in constant motion without reflection slowly disconnects you from purpose. You begin reacting to life instead of consciously shaping it. You respond to urgency instead of choosing intention. You follow demands instead of designing direction. And over time, life starts feeling heavy, even if nothing is technically wrong. Because the issue is not effort, it is unconscious effort. This is why some people who appear very active still feel lost inside. They are doing a lot, but not necessarily doing what matters most. They are engaged in many things, but not always aligned with what gives real meaning or fulfillment. And slowly, a quiet question begins to appear in the mind. Why am I doing all of this? That question is important because it signals awareness beginning to return. It shows that beneath all the activity, your mind is starting to recognize the difference between being busy and being truly alive in your actions. And the moment you start questioning constant busyness and realize that movement without direction is not progress, but only distraction in motion, is the moment you begin shifting from unconscious activity into intentional living that actually leads somewhere meaningful. One of the biggest misunderstandings people carry in life is the belief that happiness is something they will eventually find outside themselves. They are constantly taught, directly or indirectly, that happiness comes after achieving something, after reaching a certain status, after earning enough money, after being accepted, admired, or validated by others. And so life becomes a constant chase. People begin running after things they believe will complete them. They think once they reach a certain point, they will finally feel satisfied. Once they get the right job, the right relationship, the right lifestyle, the right recognition, then happiness will arrive. But what they don't realize is that this mindset keeps happiness permanently in the future. It never arrives in the present. Because every time you reach one goal, the mind immediately creates another. One achievement replaces another expectation. One desire is replaced by a newer desire. And the cycle continues endlessly. So instead of feeling fulfilled, people feel temporarily satisfied, then quickly empty again. And this creates a strange, emotional pattern where life is always about after this instead of right now. After I achieve this, I will be happy. After I get this, I will feel complete. After this situation changes, I will finally be at peace. But after never ends. Because the system is built in a way where external things are always changing, always evolving, always shifting. So if your happiness depends on external outcomes, your emotional state will always remain unstable. And this is where most people unknowingly lose their peace. They begin outsourcing their happiness to conditions they cannot fully control. They depend on outcomes, people's behavior, achievements, and external validation to feel okay internally. And when those things fluctuate, as they always do, their emotional state fluctuates with them. But true happiness was never meant to work like that, because anything dependent on external conditions is temporary by nature. It rises and falls with circumstances. It appears and disappears with situations. And it can never provide lasting peace because life itself is constantly changing. And yet most people are never taught to look inward. They are taught to improve external life first and assume internal peace will automatically follow. But in reality, it often works in the opposite direction. When the mind is unsettled internally, even success does not feel like enough. Even achievements do not feel satisfying for long. Even progress feels incomplete because the inner foundation is still unstable. This is why some people who have more still feel empty, while others with less feel more peaceful. Because happiness is not just about what you have. It is about how your mind relates to what you have. And when the mind is constantly searching outward, it becomes dependent, restless, and never fully satisfied. But when attention turns inward, something begins to shift. You start noticing that peace is not something to be found at the end of a journey, but something that can be experienced even within the present moment. Not through external achievement, but through internal understanding. And this realization slowly breaks the illusion that happiness is always somewhere else. Because the truth is, external success can add comfort, but it cannot guarantee inner peace. Only inner awareness can do that. And the moment you begin questioning the belief that happiness must always come from outside achievements and start recognizing that true stability begins within your own mind, not in external conditions, is the moment you start freeing yourself from the endless chase and slowly return to a more grounded, present, and internally balanced way of living. One of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior is not logic, not intelligence, but fear. And the most interesting part is that much of this fear is not directly experienced in reality. It is created in the mind long before anything actually happens. Most people are not reacting to life itself. They are reacting to what they imagine life might do to them. And this is how fear becomes a hidden controller. It does not announce itself loudly. It operates quietly in the background of thoughts, shaping decisions, influencing choices, and limiting actions without ever being fully noticed. It appears in the form of hesitation, doubt, overthinking, and avoidance. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of uncertainty. These fears feel real, but most of them are built on imagined outcomes rather than actual experiences. The mind creates a scenario, then reacts emotionally to that scenario as if it is already happening. And over time, these imagined fears begin to feel like truth. This is how conditioning begins. The more you think about something going wrong, the more real it starts to feel. And once it feels real, it begins influencing your behavior. You start avoiding opportunities not because you have failed, but because you are afraid you might fail. You hesitate to speak not because you were rejected, but because you fear rejection. You delay actions not because something stopped you, but because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. And slowly, life becomes smaller. Not because reality changed, but because perception changed. This is the subtle power of fear-based thinking. It does not need real events to control you. It only needs repeated thoughts. And when thoughts are repeated often enough, the mind starts treating them as warnings instead of imagination. But what most people don't realize is that fear is not always a reflection of truth. It is often a reflection of uncertainty combined with overthinking. And uncertainty is a natural part of life. No outcome in life is ever fully guaranteed. There is always an unknown element. But the mind, instead of accepting uncertainty, tries to eliminate it completely through excessive thinking. It creates scenarios, analyzes possibilities, and imagines consequences in an attempt to feel in control. But instead of gaining control, it becomes trapped. Because the more you try to predict everything, the more possibilities you discover, and the more possibilities you discover, the more anxious you become. This creates a loop where thinking about fear increases fear itself, and this is how fear grows silently inside the mind, not through real danger, but through repeated mental simulation of danger. And over time, this changes behavior. You begin playing safe in situations that require courage. You begin avoiding growth because it feels uncertain. You begin choosing comfort over challenge, not because comfort is better, but because fear has made it feel safer. But the cost of This safety is progress. Because every time fear controls a decision, potential is reduced. And the most powerful realization is this: most fears lose their power the moment they are faced in reality. What felt overwhelming in the mind often becomes manageable in experience. What felt impossible in imagination often becomes simple in action. Because reality is always more grounded than fear. And the moment you begin observing how much of your fear is created not by actual danger but by repeated thoughts and imagined scenarios, and you slowly stop letting those mental projections control your decisions, is the moment you start breaking free from fear-based programming and begin stepping into life with clarity, courage, and awareness instead of hesitation. Real power does not come from controlling the world around you. It does not come from controlling people, outcomes, or situations. Real power begins when you start understanding and controlling your own inner world, your thoughts, your habits, your reactions, and your conditioning. And that begins with self-awareness. Most people move through life on autopilot. They react instead of reflect. They repeat patterns instead of questioning them. They feel emotions without understanding where those emotions come from. And because of that, they often live the same experiences again and again without realizing. They are the ones unconsciously creating those patterns. But the moment self-awareness enters your life, everything begins to change. Because self-awareness is the ability to observe yourself clearly. It is the moment you step outside your automatic reactions and start watching your own thoughts instead of being controlled by them. You begin noticing why you think the way you think. You begin recognizing why certain situations trigger certain emotions. You begin seeing patterns in your behavior that were always there but never consciously observed, and this awareness is powerful because you cannot change what you cannot see. Most limitations in life are not created by external barriers, but by internal conditioning that goes unnoticed. Fear-based thoughts, habitual reactions, emotional impulses, all of these operate quietly in the background, shaping decisions without conscious permission. But self-awareness interrupts that process. It too creates space between stimulus and response, and in that space, choice becomes possible. Instead of reacting instantly, you begin pausing. Instead of following old patterns automatically, you begin questioning them. Instead of accepting every thought as truth, you begin observing thoughts objectively, and this is where real transformation begins, because awareness gives you control over direction. You start realizing that not every thought deserves action, not every emotion needs expression, not every habit deserves continuation, and not every belief you hold was consciously chosen. Many were simply absorbed over time. And once you see this clearly, you can no longer live unconsciously in the same way. Self-awareness also helps you understand your emotional patterns. You begin noticing what drains your energy and what strengthens it. You begin understanding what environments affect your mindset negatively and what situations help you grow. You start recognizing the difference between reaction and response. And slowly, your behavior becomes intentional instead of automatic. This shift is subtle at first, but extremely powerful over time. Because when you are no longer controlled by unconscious patterns, your decisions become clearer, your emotions become more stable, your relationships become healthier, your thinking becomes more structured, and your actions become more aligned with your real intentions instead of temporary impulses. And this is what real personal power looks like. Not domination over others, but mastery over self. Because the more aware you become, the less life feels like something happening to you, and the more it feels like something you are consciously shaping from within. And over time, self-awareness leads to freedom. Freedom from automatic reactions. Freedom from unconscious habits. Freedom from emotional confusion. Freedom from limiting patterns that were never truly yours to begin with. And the deeper you go into self-awareness, the more you realize that most of what controls people in life is not external force but internal blindness, not seeing their own patterns clearly enough to change them. But awareness removes that blindness. And once you see clearly, you naturally begin choosing differently, not because someone forced you to change, but because you finally understand yourself well enough to no longer live unconsciously. And the moment you begin questioning your own thoughts, observing your own behavior, and becoming deeply aware of your inner patterns instead of living on autopilot is the moment you start reclaiming true control over your life from within. Real change in life rarely happens suddenly. It does not come from one moment of motivation or one powerful realization alone. True transformation begins quietly, in the background of your mind, when you stop living automatically and start becoming conscious of how you are actually living. Most people go through life repeating patterns without even realizing it. They wake up, follow routines, respond to situations, react to emotions, and move through days almost exactly the same way. Not because they choose to, but because they are operating on mental autopilot. Their thoughts, decisions, and behaviors are mostly driven by habit conditioning and external influence rather than conscious awareness. And this is why change feels difficult for so many people, because they are trying to change their life without changing their awareness. But everything begins with awareness. The moment you start noticing your own patterns, how you think, how you react, how you avoid, how you repeat certain behaviors, something powerful starts to shift inside you. You begin seeing your life instead of just living it unconsciously. You begin observing yourself instead of only reacting to situations. And that observation is the beginning of transformation. Because once you see something clearly, you can no longer ignore it in the same way. This is where mental awakening begins, not as a dramatic event, but as a subtle shift in perception. You start realizing that many of your daily struggles are not random. They are repeated cycles created by unconscious habits and unexamined thoughts. And once you see the cycle, you begin to question it. Why do I react this way? Why do I keep repeating this pattern? Why do I feel stuck even when I try to change? These questions are not signs of confusion. They are signs of awareness beginning to grow, because conscious thinking replaces automatic living. And as awareness increases, something very important happens. You stop living purely based on impulse and start living with intention. You begin pausing before reacting. You begin thinking before deciding. You begin choosing your actions instead of just following them automatically. And this shift changes everything. Your emotional responses become more stable because you are no longer reacting blindly. Your decisions become more thoughtful because they are no longer driven by habit alone. Your life becomes more structured because you are no longer lost in unconscious repetition. And slowly, you start feeling more in control of yourself. Not control over everything outside, but control over your inner direction. This is the real meaning of waking up mentally. It is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming aware. It is about no longer living on autopilot. It is about recognizing that you have the ability to observe your own mind instead of being fully controlled by it. And once that awareness becomes consistent, life begins to transform naturally. You start breaking old cycles. You start choosing better responses. You start aligning your actions with what you actually want instead of what your habits push you toward. And most importantly, you stop feeling like life is just happening to you, because now you are actively participating in it with awareness, and the deeper this awareness grows, the more you realize that transformation was never about changing the outside world first. It was always about waking up internally and learning to live consciously instead of unconsciously in every moment of your daily life. And the moment you stop living on mental autopilot and finally begin observing your thoughts, questioning your patterns and choosing your actions with full awareness instead of unconscious repetition is the moment your entire life begins shifting from automatic existence into conscious transformation. And the moment you wake up from autopilot, question everything you were taught, and finally start living with full awareness instead of unconscious repetition is the moment your real life truly begins.